Hello, YouTube. Hello. Hello, YouTube. This is Alex Aquarius. If I'm streaming, I'm not sure if this starts exactly when I hit start streaming, or if it waits a few seconds. How many times did you hear me say, hello, YouTube? I said it twice. All right. Today's topic. How many of you have heard of Easter? How about Ishtar? You know, a lot of people pronounce Ishtar, this goddess of fertility and war and love. They pronounce her name as Ishtar. But actually, in the regions where she's worshipped, it was pronounced Easter. So it's actually Easter. And wouldn't you know it, what time of the year do we celebrate? Well, let's go back. Fertility and crops. Crop fertility. So if you wanted to have really, really good crops, you would have offerings and sacrifices to Easter. And when does the spring start? How about around April when we're doing this? And this is why Easter is in the spring. And do you think that's a coincidence? Or sometimes if you ask Christians, you say like, well, hey, Easter, how come if we're celebrating the resurrection of the Savior, then where did the rabbit come from and the Easter eggs? Are you already guessing? You're already figuring it out? If you've never read this or studied this at all, with just what I've said, I just gave you the clues. Why do you think rabbits are important on the day that I won't say we, not all of you, worship Easter, the goddess of love, fertility, and war? I guess it depends on which one you wanted to worship her for. If you wanted love, you would make offerings to her. If you were going to war, you would make offerings to her. If you wanted to have a baby, or maybe you wanted to get pregnant, you would make offerings to Easter. But, so why do you think rabbits are important on Easter Day? And eggs. Some people think like, well, rabbits don't lay eggs. What are we doing? Rabbits don't lay eggs. Why would we have a rabbit? People are just all confused. And a lot of people would just rather not think about it or have never thought about it. And some people, if you start to read about it and study ancient, the Lavant region, do you know where that is? The Lavant region is today where we have from the ancient southern Judea up through Israel, up into Syria and Lebanon and Jordan. That area is called the Lavant region. Basically, the eastern side of the Mediterranean on over to almost Mesopotamia, where then you have today's Iraq and Syria. But I think Syria is also included in Lavant region, or it's overlapping. Maybe we'll find a map tonight or today, if you're watching this in playback, we'll find a map that will show us. Maybe we'll look that up. But I don't want to jump ahead. Let's start out. Maybe some of you have seen these images before, and maybe you've been watching Gaia or History Channel or Ancient Aliens or something, and you've seen these models of the gods depicted, chiseled into these rocks. And let me reduce my size here so you can see. This Ishtar was from 1800. Okay, and then Ishtar from the year 750. But I believe, is this BCE? Was this BC or AD? I don't know the new terms, folks. I know people use now the new corrected terms, which include like BCE and the other one. I still use BC and AD. But I know that, let's look up the images. Oh, what was I going to say? The one that is currently worshipped as Astarte in ancient Palestine, Judea, and Israel, the Astarte was also known as Ashtoreth. That was 600 BC. But if you go back 4,000 years BC, it was Innana. And it was back in southern Iran and Iraq, in that area of when you go down into Babylon south, cities like Ur. There's that region down there where there are 3 or 4. There's that southern area had one that they called, let's see, there was Innana. I think she was from north in about 2500 BC, but the original goddess was from the southern area of today's Iraq, which was Ur. That's basically where you see the temples. The most ancient, was that where the Phoenician ruins are? You know, there are a lot of terms we hear. You may have heard of Canaan. That's the Lavant region. That includes Judea and Jordan when it was divided. You know, before you had the state of Israel, you had that area, which the southern part of it was actually called Judea, and the northern part was called Israel. And north of that, you have Syria and Lebanon. But if you go over to where today's Iraq is, and Iran and those areas, you have others. And what happened was, I think when the ancient Sumer, the Sumerians in Sumer, that's where this started. And you had, I'm forgetting her name there now. You had Innana. Astarte was the most modern name, but other than Innana, there's another name. Dang it, it will come up. But did you know that? Let me go back to why we celebrate Easter today. So did you think when you celebrated Easter today, and you probably, if you have children, you had an Easter egg hunt, and you have rabbit symbolism and Easter, it's because rabbits are highly productive. They're highly reproductive. They have tons of offspring, and their gestation period is short, and they can multiply very quickly. And they're very fertile animals. And that's why the rabbit is the animal of Easter. And that's because Ishtar is pronounced Easter. And with the date that we're celebrating, actually, when we celebrate on the 6th of, I don't know if, is it the 6th of April every year? I don't think so. I don't remember how they come up with the calendar dates. It's like the first Sunday of the month of April, whatever date that it falls on. Some of those holidays are found that way, and it's kind of confusing how we just look at a calendar and it tells us, oh, Easter's on the 6th of April. But I'm sorry, I'm confused already, because today's the 5th, and today was Easter. Well, at church, most people would celebrate Easter today. Tomorrow's Easter, the 6th. Yeah, so I got the date right. I've got my day wrong. I'm talking to you. It's almost midnight, but I'm still on April 5th. But as we get into this video more, if you're live here, it's going to be April 6th. Okay, so I started a little bit early. But April 6th is Monday. But I'm sure every Christian celebrated in church on Sunday Easter. Now you know why the eggs are hidden everywhere. You know, the rabbit, because fertility is most noticed in those animals for their short gestation period and the amount of offspring they're able to have, and they're super fertile. But also eggs represent fertility, right? So how did that get confused, folks? How did we end up as Christians celebrating our Lord's resurrection on a date that we've named after the goddess of fertility? And a lot of times I've talked to Christians about this before, and when you tell them this, they're like, oh, no, that's just, people relate the two and they put them together and that came afterward. It's like literally, which came first, the rabbit or the egg? That's my joke. But which came first, you know? It's like when you tell people Christmas is exactly on winter solstice. It starts on December 22nd and it goes for 3 days until December 25th. That's when the sun goes to its furthest southern point, which is called the Tropic of... When you're looking on a globe and you look where the sun goes down in the southern hemisphere. In the north, we have wintertime, but did you know in the south, they're having summertime? Like on December 22nd to December 25th, that's winter solstice. If you're watching a shadow, like if you go to St. Peter's Square at the Vatican and you look at the obelisk, it marks the winter solstice in those white lines in the circle. It's called astrotheology. It's religion based on astronomy, is what it is. So when you're looking at those lines, and if you watch it, if you stood there from December 22nd to the 25th, the sun will stay on exactly the same spot for 3 days, and then it will continue moving north. And we talked about that in a previous video I just did. Did you know that? Do you know what the Tropic of Capricorn means? Did I say Cancer? It's Capricorn. That's the southern one. The northern tropic is Cancer. And what that is, I think it's 27.5 degrees. If the equator is 0 and you went up with a protractor and you went up about 27.5 degrees, that's where the tropics, that's as high as the sun goes in its journey. In the summer solstice, the word means, sol means sun, and stis means basically where it stands. So the standing of the sun spot, it's the spot where the sun stands. So it's when the sun goes up, like let's say in the summer solstice, the sun is over the equator. And when it goes up, I think it's 27.5 degrees. If you had a protractor on the equator and you measured 27.5 degrees, that's where the parallels are around the globe. I'm explaining to you this, if you haven't studied it before or you never knew why, I'll just throw this in here. I'll try to make it basic so you can understand it. But the sun never goes higher than 27.5 degrees above the equator. What that means is if, let's say in the summertime, you go out and let's say you have a window that all year long, I'm going to say you have a chair on your front porch, and your front porch faces west, and you see the sun go down. If you sit in the same chair or in the same spot, it has to be very precise, or maybe you could line up with a doorway, and you see where the sun goes down, go out on the rail on the porch and mark it with a pencil. And then every day that the sun goes down, you try to, as best you can, estimate where the exact middle of the sun points down on the horizon and mark a pencil line on your banister or your rail on your porch. And do that all year long. And you're going to find out that if you're facing west, as the year ticks on, your pencil marks go to the left. And it's going to go all the way to December 22nd. And then on December 22nd, let me move my hand. Then on December 22nd, you're going to mark it. And the very next day, you're going to mark it in exactly the same spot. On the 23rd. And on the 24th, same thing. And on the 25th, when the sun goes down, you're going to notice it moved up a little bit to the right. And then from there, all the way to the middle of the summer, your pencil marks, if you're facing west, are going to go to your right, all the way across your banister, your porch railing, all the way back to the middle of summer. Okay? And that's the farthest the sun goes. And then there are no 3 steps. When it stops in the summer, it just turns around the next day, like it's going to the right. And your last tick mark will be one day, and the very next day will be right back to the left. It just goes tick, 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 bounce, tick, 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 back the other way. But when it gets to the south, it does something different. It goes tick, 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 and then it stops. Excuse me, my alarm. It's midnight. And then when you get all the way to the south, it goes tick, tick, tick. It goes bounce, stop, and it goes tick, tick, tick on the same spot, and then starts heading back to the right again. So I don't know if you've ever done that. It'd be interesting. I actually do that because I have my patio faces the west, and when it's in the middle of the summer, that sun beats down right at my face, and it's right there. I can see easily here in Austin, where I am, where it goes down, and it's right. It's bright, and not only is the sun bright outside, and there's a lot of sun, but it's beaming right through my patio. But then in the wintertime, if I'm at winter solstice, if I go out on December 22nd, the sun is so far to the left that I can't see it because of a wall on the side of my patio. And if I wanted to see the sun where it's setting, I'd have to peek out around my railing and see where the sun's gone down. Just like I told you, I don't know if you've ever done that, but you can do the same thing if you face east. You can do it with the sunrise. You don't have to do it with the sunset. But did you know that the Sphinx in Egypt faces the east? It faces due east. So there it is with its paws facing due east, and it's showing you, actually, when the sun comes up, there's a constellation in the stars that's behind the sun. Whether it's day or night, the stars are still there and the constellations are still in the same place, whether you can see them or not. And that's how you know what sign we're in, because when the sun comes up in the morning in the east, what is the constellation that's behind the sun? And right now we're going into Aquarius. And that's the reason why I took on the moniker. I use my middle name and the name Aquarius, because the sign of Aquarius is a man bearing a pitcher of water that's pouring. And it's actually in the thumbnail of this video. I made a really interesting photograph when I first started this channel about 7 or 8 years ago. I included it on this thumbnail. I'm on a Segway. I'm in front of the SpaceX building in the parking lot in Houston, right by the Johnson Space Center. It's the old SpaceX facility where they first started out. And I'm on my Segway. I'm wearing a blue shirt, which represents the water. And I've actually got a silver pitcher, and I'm pouring water on the ground. And it all just came to me. It was kind of weird. I chose the name Alex Aquarius. I had to go find a picture. It was really odd. I had like a spiritual experience when I bought that picture. I can't remember how I lost it, but when I bought it, I found it at a Goodwill. And I was driving from Houston down to Galveston. And something told me I had no plans to go to Goodwill. But I remember I'd put in the back of my head, earlier that week, like, I hope there was a Goodwill closer. I lived near the Johnson Space Center at that time. Actually on the same street. I lived on Saturn Lane, and which is where the entrance to NASA is, the Johnson Space Center. And I tried the Goodwill. I couldn't find any good picture. But then I was driving down to Galveston. Something told me, maybe if I get off at this stop, I'll find a thrift store and I'll be able to find that picture. And I got off the exit. I can't remember what town it was. Right before, it may have been closer to. It was past League City. It was further south. But when I walked in that Goodwill, and as soon as I walked in the door, it was like it stood there brightly on the top of the shelf at the back of the store, and I heard the choirs go, ah, and it was just right there, and I went, "There's the picture." So that's where I got the picture that you see in the thumbnail. But this picture is interesting that I took the thumbnail because it represents a segue. So we're moving out of Pisces into Aquarius, and all that means is when you face east, like the Sphinx does, the constellation that you see in the morning is Aquarius now, because the stars of Aquarius are moving into that spot. And for over 2,000 years, almost 2,100 years, since the time of Christ, it's been Pisces. Okay? And before that, you know what it was? It was Aries. You know how I know that? It's because Moses said, blow the ram's horn, which was a symbol of Aries. And then Moses, at that time, remember when he came off the mountain and his face was shining? I think he was eating monatomic gold because it makes your face shine. And they used to do things. I think the shewbread in the temple of the priests was monatomic gold. I've done a lot of research, and that's my conclusion. But when Moses went up on the mountain, I think he made monatomic element gold, because it says that when he came down and he saw the wickedness of the people, he made them burn the calf that they made, and the next day it was strewn upon the water, and he told all the people to drink it. And do you remember the sons of Aaron, who were was that his brother? The sons of the priests of Aaron ran through the camps with swords in both hands and slayed all the men and chopped their heads off, which doesn't make that much. This is in Exodus, I think, chapter 36, 37. No, the 10 Commandments are chapter 20. But I think the story of running through the camp and chopping all men's heads off. I mean, how could you imagine that? You've got all these people that followed you out of Cairo, followed you into the desert, and then, boom, you run through the camp and kill a bunch of people after you come down from Mount Sinai. There are a lot of conflictory details and facts about where that story happens in the Bible, because where's Mount Sinai? But back to Ishtar. I'm talking a little bit about astrotheology and how we get it into our religion as Christians. Because, for one, we worship on Sunday, which, if you were going to worship the sun, which day of the week would you worship it on? I'm talking about open-minded talk about, where Christianity and astrotheology cross into each other. First of all, Christians worship on Sunday. They celebrate Easter, which they actually call Easter if you spell it Ishtar, which is the way it's pronounced, which is a fertility celebration day. The rabbit, the eggs. But then I kind of included their Christmas story is actually on winter solstice. And that's when the sun stops literally for 3 days in the same spot. So people say the sun dies and is reborn on the third day, which really means if they're looking at the crops, they're wondering like, oh no, the sun's going away. Will it come back? Will it come back? And they told the people, they controlled the people, the government, the control of the mind. The sun's going to go away if you don't make all your offerings and sacrifices. The sun's not going to come back. I wonder if it'll come back this year. You mean it might not? So when it got down there to the last days on the Tropic of Capricorn, the sun rose and set on the same spot for 3 days, and then it started coming back. And then they said the sun had risen, the sun had risen. So there's a complete tie into the story of Jesus's death and resurrection, if you believe that part of the gospel. All right. I personally used to, but then I found a lot of stories about where Jesus traveled after the crucifixion and through several stories and through several countries. And there are stories and histories coming out of those countries about what he did there. For instance, a monastery in China, in far western China, some Protestant missionaries were there. I think they were, can't remember what faith, but they were talking to these monks and they said, "Hey, you want to see the scrolls from when Jesus came here?" And they said, "What? When Jesus came here?" And they go, "Yeah. He taught our monks here and he shared teachings with us. And we've got them on scrolls. We can read them for you." And it turned out to be about the same as Matthew chapter 5, which is what? The Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount. Yeah, I know my Bible. I've read it 7 times, twice in Spanish, once in Portuguese. But today we're going to talk about Easter. I'm going to show you some videos. Let's see, did I have a video there? This one. Let's get this one started. And I'm going to just start it up and see where I'm at.
Things to many people, and quite a few
Do you hear
goddesses
that?
assumed the name Ishtar. During
Hold on. I have to do this every time I start a video. I'm going to put on, let's see, monitor and output. Okay, that's on. Because I don't hear it in my monitor. Why am I not? I go through this every once in a while and I know why. Okay, I've got that. Got that. Let me start this again, see if I hear it in my...
the time of
I
the
think I just have
Assyrian
to wait a few
Empire,
seconds. I
the
found it.
famous
Hold on.
Ashurbanipal recited a prayer to 2 different Ishtars, Ishtar of Arbela and Ishtar of Nineveh. Quote, "Exalt and extol the Lady of Nineveh,
Do you
honor and
hear that?
praise the Lady of Erbil.
You can
None
hear it through
equal
my
them
microphone.
among the great gods. All the goddesses cherish their name.
Gosh
Their
darn
2
it.
sanctuaries are unsurpassed, as are their
Every
shrines.
time I get this figured
Words
out and I
shine on
set up
their
for a
lips like
video with
holy
my
fire.
studio,
Their
I have to
speech will be
reset
revered forever."
several
End
things.
quote. These goddesses were distinct personalities, each worthy of
Hold
individual
on.
worship. In addition, Assyrian Ishtar was worshipped separately, and the god
There you go.
Ashur's consort, Mulisu, was conflated with Ishtar of Nineveh starting in the 7th century.
Okay.
Fundamentally, Ishtar was the goddess of love and war,
If you're in the
but this
chat,
is
say
just a broad
hello,
distinction.
mention
Her
anything.
identity was extremely complex depending on the motivations and situation of the scribe who extolled her. Simple categorizations will not do for such a dynamic and pervasive deity. Sometimes she was a fierce warrior goddess. Others, she was the tender mother of the king, or even the sexual partner of the king. After the fall of the Assyrian Empire, her status was greatly diminished, though small groups still revered her until some time after Alexander the Great swept across the Near East. Like most gods, she faded into obscurity as the power structures that promoted her crumbled.
Hellenistic means Greece. You know that? Hellenistic. Helena. That's where Greece comes from.
If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe or like the video, and keep an eye out for my upcoming video on the great conquests of Tiglath-Pileser against the Levant.
All right. Let's see this other one. This is about Ishtar.
Of romance and family love.
This is more of
Meet
a
goddess Astarte, a figure of immense power
modern
from Phoenician
interpretation.
mythology. She was not only the goddess of love, but also of fertility and war, a unique combination that made her a key figure in ancient religion. Astarte held sway over matters of the heart. She was often invoked in matters of romance and family.
Let me say, Astarte was her modern name in the Levant, remember I said, but more anciently she was Ishtar. Easter.
Family love. Astarte was also the goddess of fertility, a beacon of hope for those wishing to start families. But Astarte was not just a goddess of creation. As the goddess of war, she ruled over conflicts and battles, her power both feared and revered. Astarte symbolized the intricate balance between creation and destruction, love and war, life and death. She represented the dual nature of existence. As such, Astarte is a symbol of the interconnectedness of all aspects of life, a testament to the richness and complexity of the human experience. Meet goddess.
You know, to me, I'm not telling you I worship these things or believe in them. I think this is actually silly what we just watched. Okay. But that's the modern interpretation of, you'll see a lot of people, I think, like this video
this
here.
week we are talking about goddesses mentioned in the Bible and in the Hebrew faiths. So today's goddess is Astarte. Astarte was a powerful and widely worshipped goddess in the ancient Near East,
it was
with her
Astarte.
influence spreading across various cultures. Often referred to as the Queen of Heaven, she is primarily associated with love, sexuality, and war, reflecting a complex and multifaceted divine nature. Her origins can be
Astarte.
I am Astarte, Queen of Heaven, goddess of love and war. For millennia, I have slumbered in stone, forgotten by time. My domain is love, fierce and passionate. My strength is war, relentless and unyielding. Remember me, mortals. I am eternal.
Basically, if you don't want to be confused or get upset, this is where the people of the Lavant region from Judea, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, those areas, that's where Astarte is. That's where the name came from. And that's the later because some of those people were in Sumer. They were in Sumeria as slaves under Nebuchadnezzar. Remember that when before they came back to Canaan, or Palestine as we would call it, they were slaves under Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. And there it would have been Ishtar or Innana. But all of those things are related to Baal worship. If you've seen in the Epstein files, people are talking a lot about Baal worship and how these billionaire elites seem to all gravitate around this Babylonian Sumerian religion of Baal, which was, some say, the husband of Astarte or Innana. And in Egypt, it's Isis. That's where the story of Isis and Osiris, who was the husband, and then the son was Horus. And as you go through each religion, some of these ancient religions, and you look around, you're going to see a trinity of the Father God, and then the wife, goddess of fertility and love and war, and then you're going to see a son, which was either a great warrior or a hero or a Messiah or a sacrifice. And it seems to be the same stories repeating themselves and being interpreted. And as there are so many regions, if you don't know your geography like I don't, I know somewhat, I can look on maps, but I can tell you, as you go down, all the way down into Babylon, in the most southern area, that's where you'll find this town called Ur. U-R. That's basically where the thing started. And then as it went up, the name changed to Innana. I keep forgetting the first one. And then when it wasn't until probably like the chart we saw earlier, it wasn't Astarte until it got up into Canaan in the northwestern areas on that map. But all along, know that this was sun worship, folks. This was not Islam. Islam did not start, you know that, until 600 AD. So it wasn't Christianity and it was not Islam. These are the ancient religions of all of these countries and all of these different regions with all of their gods. They all had a goddess of love and war, and they had a male figure that was God, or the husband and lover of that one. And then there was a son. So there's always a Trinity. I find it interesting now, and as Christians, we have Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. But as a ex-Christian, I want to tell you, I believe in the Lord, and up there in heaven right now, over this flat earth, this infinite plane, there is a Lord and there is a God above that firmament. But he does not like baptism because that represents the death and the resurrection on that solstice I told you about. I'm not going to get sidetracked. But let's listen to this short here on Tammuz, Horus, and Nihiru, Baal, Hadad, Lord, Osiris, Demuzi. Yeah, the father was Demuzi or Osiris. Ishtar, Isis, was the mother or wife figure. Was it, in some of the stories, when the father died, the mother married the son. And I think that's what happened in the story of Tammuz with Astarte. But you can see how through all this, all the way from Babylon over, all the way into the Lavant, the names change. There's so many different names in so many different languages. But it's basically all goes back to the same thing. It's Baal worship and it is sun worship. But basically, when we get to the New Testament, sun worship became Christianity, but we still worship on Sunday, but I think it's whitewashed Baal worship. What's in the Bible, the gospel is, we believe in resurrection. We have death and resurrection. We drink blood. We bathe in blood. We eat flesh to pay for our sins. We worship on Sunday, and we practice fertility rituals on Easter. And, and we do all of these things, which are tenets. It's like check all of the boxes. And then we say, oh, no, we're not pagan. No. And even the Vatican has an obelisk, which is a sundial, which shows you where the solstices are. If you just pull up a picture of let's do that. Let's pull up a picture of St. Peter's Square. Let's watch this video real quick.
Activity of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebu is a Sumerian word. They carried that.
Let me go back to the beginning of this short.
And Isis, our mother, our blessed mother Isis, while in Egypt. When we were in Sumeria, she was called Ishtar. And Osiris was our heavenly father. He was our link to Ra, the sun, the life source. And in Sumeria, he was called what? Damuzi.
Okay, right there, when you hear about Baal or Ra, those are the same people, folks. That's the same male deity that is their God or Heavenly Father. It's Baal.
And Damuzi and Ishtar had a very special son that they called Tammuz.
Yeah.
And that's why the Babylonians have on their calendar Tammuz. And the Jews, when they left out of the captivity of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebu is a Sumerian word. They carried that title, and it's in the Jewish calendar right now. Tammuz is still on the calendar for that.
Yeah. Did you know that a lot of like I told you, the Lavant region, which is where the Jews are, they still have on their calendar Tammuz. And a lot of them, remember when was it the women were weeping for Tammuz at the doors of the temple when the Lord was there? So these things are mentioned. It was going on just 2,100 years ago, right there at the doorsteps of the temple when the Lord was alive on the earth. And by the way, I believe in the Lord. I believe he was born and when he was and everything. I just think he survived and escaped Israel and lived a long life. And he's buried in India, in a town in Kashmir called Srinagar. in a shrine called Rosabal, Rosabal. Look it up. So let's hear this one.
God, that Messiah that the Jews are waiting for. And it tells them in the book of Ezekiel that the women of Israel sat in Jehovah or Yahweh's house and cried for Tammuz, right in the Bible.
Yeah, right there.
The Israelite women were crying for a Babylonian god. It tells them that they left the worship of Yahweh and worshiped the god Baal or Baal. Baal Hadad, a Babylonian deity, and that's also in their doctrine. They've turned the word Baal around in Hebrew when referring to Abraham, and you write in your Bible, you see Lord. It said in Abraham, my Lord. In Hebrew, it says, Abraham, my Baal. So Mary is no more than Isis, our mother, our blessed mother Isis. While
Okay, there again, you have the story where, remember what I said? I think that Christianity is just whitewashed, reversed, bleached sun worship. Because even the story of Mary, like he just said, it's really Ishtar or Astarte. And the sun would be Tammuz. And the Heavenly Father would be Baal. And this is what the Hebrews were going through, right? I mean, it's more complicated than we're talking about now. We're kind of smushing it all together, but it actually went by regions, by different names in different centuries. But basically, overall, it's all Baal worship. And when you talk about Solomon, did you know that the term Jew did not even exist, I don't think, until I think it was late 1700s, early 1800s. And when we talk about Solomon and the star, that's called the seal of Solomon, but Solomon used it as a seal because it came from prior sun worship, and it was a symbol of Saturn, and from Saturn worship. Have you ever heard of the black cube and cube worship? That's another important one, people. Look up cube, the black cube or cube worship. Okay, I'm going to pull up a image of St. Peter's Square. All right. Let me find one. Here, I'll let you look at what I'm looking at. Let's find one that shows those what looks like chalk lines. It looks like chalk lines. Can you see it on this one? Right there, you can kind of see it. You see these lines. There's a white line there. You see that white line there. There's another line there. And there's another line there. Those are the solstices. Now, looks like from the time this picture was taken, where's the shadow of that obelisk? It looks like it's over here. You could probably tell, basically guess at what time this picture was taken. I'm going to guess. Because judging by the vegetation is very green. This has to be, well, let's see. It's closer to fall. See some yellow leaves. Let's see, what are we closer to? I would say this is summer solstice right here. And this is the fall, and the winter solstice is right here. And this would be the spring. Look at that. And I did all that just by looking at the color of the vegetation and the shadows from the obelisk in St. Peter's Square, which is a circle. Did you ever wonder that? Did you know that if you look at Dealey Plaza in Dallas, right there where the limo went by, where Abraham Zapruder was standing when he filmed the assassination, there's that building behind him. Let me go back to me. There's that building behind him. It's semicircle. It's a semicircle. And if you look on the other side of the plaza, there's another semicircle. And then on the other end, there's another one. There are 4 parts of semicircles, and if you could put them together, you would get a circle, a full circle. But the center, right where Kennedy was shot, was the center of the consecrated grounds of Dealey Plaza, which was supposed to be the first building of the Masonic Temple. I don't think they ever built one there, but the two Jesuit missionaries who founded Dallas, and what they do is they do this with divining rods, where you hold the copper and you wait till they cross. It's important because you can mark off the ley lines where the energy comes out of the ground, and you can find ley lines, and where several ley lines cross, you have an energy node. It's a ley node. And Dealey Plaza is a very important node where several lines cross. And where that ball tower is, the Reunion Tower on the west end of Dallas, that's, wherever you have a node is called a Cloud 9. Guess what the restaurant is called in the tower, in the Reunion Tower? Cloud 9. I went there with a friend, and we were doing some investigation in the Kennedy assassination, and we were walking over by the tower and underneath, and we walked all over Dealey Plaza and under the bridge and all over, and we noticed when we were walking underground by the train station that the restaurant was called Cloud 9, and we both just went, oh my gosh, it's such esoteric, which means hidden information. It's such deep hidden information that nobody would know that except for someone who's been initiated or who's been doing a ton of research. That when you get to the Reunion Tower and you find out the spinning restaurant that's in the ball is called Cloud 9, that's for a reason. So what is it about ley line nodes? It was important for the Freemasons and Jesuits and anyone who was involved at that time in different departments of government that would have had anything to do with his passing away, that they did it right there on that spot within those semicircles. And just as we were talking about here when you see it in the St. Peter Circle. I say that to be funny, but it's a square. But that's another thing. Have you ever heard of circling the square? Right here, if you walked around here, you could circle a square. I saw that in the Family Guy episode. Family Guy is so deep. You know how they Family Guy has a lot of reveals. There was a reveal that I caught in Family Guy where the family goes downtown, and they go down to in the city, and there's a square. And then it wasn't Peter, his son, not Brian's dog. Can you Chris? He goes, "Hey, Dad, we're circling the square." And I just went. There's so many little Easter eggs in that cartoon. Dad, we're circling the square. Let me see what it looks like. Let's see this picture. There they are. Do you see those lines? They're clear now. There aren't as many people. Let's view the file. There we go. Do I have you with me? Yeah, you're the same window. Let's move it around. You can see the whole thing there. You see that? Look at that. Look at that. That is St. Peter's Square. Now, all around the top of St. Peter's Square, you have these statues of all of these saints. Saints, and I don't know who they all are. One day I would have to. I'm not that interested, but I would have to see basically who are all of these statues. But do you see these lines? They are. This must be a cloudy day because I don't see a shadow. I do not see a shadow, but the obelisk is like a sundial, and it casts a shadow. Do you see the four lines here on the inner circle? This is just like a zodiac wheel, and it's got a circle in the center that has four radiuses like that. If you've ever noticed, you look in the middle of your. Have you ever noticed on churches or let's say Montessori schools, Go look anytime right now. I swear, this hit me one day like hard in the chest. I was just like, wow, I couldn't believe this has gotten away from me my whole life. I never noticed that. But if you look at any modern Christian churches today, and I drove by, I was in Dallas, and I was driving down Highway 121, and I looked at an overpass or an intersection. There were three different churches, and all three of them had a round window with the cross shape in it. And it looks just like this. But do you know what it really represents? The center of the zodiac wheel. Dun, dun, dun. That's right. It represents the center of the zodiac wheel. So that was another thing that I learned. I do a lot of deep research, and then I started having epiphanies, and then I'm driving around, and then bam. I remember I was just driving, and I saw that window, and I thought, even the Mormon, the LDS church has it on it. The new local fancy yuppie church has it on it. The other religion has it on it. The Methodist has it on it. And then I started noticing that most modern religions in their most modern buildings have a circle like this, which is shocking actually. When you start understanding what I've been talking about since the beginning of this video, that starting with Easter and the fertility ritual. I try to wake up Christians and say, hey, did you put out Easter baskets for your kids? I did. I raised four kids. We had Easter baskets. And we tried the plastic eggs, but the squirrels found out how to open them up, and they were eating candy. We used real eggs. They didn't touch them. But baskets full of candy, and it's all fun, and you get the chocolate bunnies. And it's just so exciting. You try to tell a Christian, like, it's really a pagan ritual. Everything you're doing. The rabbit and the egg. Where does that come from? Do you know how to pronounce this name? Ishtar. Ishtar. Well, it's Easter. That's what really Easter is. No. I mean, that came later. They're going to say that. It just happened to be on the same day, or it just happens to be pronounced that way, but we're not celebrating it. And they will go through mental gymnastics to tell you that, well, this is identical to that. All the way down, every point or tenet that you talk about. Each religion, sun worship, Christianity. And they're the same, folks. This has been a huge epiphany in my life. So anyway. Let's see how many of these are. How many are these? There's eight of these spaces. So there must be an in between. But can you see a shadow there? Looks like most of the people are over here. I'm guessing the shadow might be over here. But it's a cloudy day. Let's go look at another one. Let's see. I want a bright day where there's shadows. Like a afternoon photo. Panoramic view. St. Peter's Square. How's that panoramic? Doesn't move. That one's not that interesting. Let's look and see. I want to find one. Here's one. Do you see a shadow? I don't see the shadow. Anyway, let's go back to Ishtar right now. Easter. And see another video. Saw that one. We saw. What was this one? The train. Saw that one. Saw that one. This video that I found, this first one.
Of Nineveh, honor and praise the Lady of Erbil. None equal them among the great gods. All the goddesses cherish their name. Their two sanctuaries are unsurpassed, as are their shrines. Words shine on their lips like holy fire. Their speech will be revered forever. End quote. These goddesses were distinct personalities, each worthy of individual worship. In addition, Assyrian Ishtar was worshipped separately, and the god Ashur's consort, Mulisu, was conflated with Ishtar of Nineveh starting in the 7th century. Fundamentally, Ishtar was the goddess of love and war, but this is just a broad distinction.
Shout out to this video that I'm lifting from Landmark History, because he goes through and he names, like you just heard him. He's talking about the later Assyrian version and talks about what century as he goes through. And here are some of the maps. Let's look at the maps.
But through the strong cultural contact of this period, they would become one, Innana being her Sumerian name and Ishtar her Akkadian one. Following the collapse of Sargon's empire, Innana would retain importance in the ideology.
Let me stop real quick here before this map disappears. I don't want to interrupt the guy, but if you look here, this is Ur. Ur, when you think about Ur, it's all the way down south in Babylon. But I think there's a valley, and if you look at the towns around, Jirsu and Nippur, and I think there was a valley here where it's talked about in the Old Testament, like in Ezekiel. Do you remember the priests of Baal in 1 Kings? Where did Ezekiel burn that sacrifice against the priests of Baal? Anybody want to tell me in the chat? Please hit me. But here we go. This is a very old map.
State of Ur. Particularly interesting is her role in the sacred marriage with the king, which has been a matter of controversy for some time now. Over the next 1,000 years, she retained a position of great import to people from Babylon to Syria. She is even seen through the name Astarte in the Lavant. Though we have a tendency to think of Ishtar as one goddess, she became many things to many people, and quite a few goddesses assumed the name Ishtar. During the time of the Assyrian Empire, the famous Ashurbanipal recited a prayer to two different Ishtars, Ishtar of Arbela and Ishtar of Nineveh. Quote, exalt and
I want to stop that right. This just made me laugh. It reminded me of something. He recited to two different Ishtars from two different towns. It's like the Marys that you find in Latin America. I've spent my career about 33 years as I specialized in Latin American medical devices, vaccines, pharmaceuticals for humans, animals, all kinds of stuff. I've been on chicken farms all over. I've been in every town in Latin America, every country. And there is a Mary in every town. She's got a different name in every town. And I've asked the locals, like, well, how come there's a Virgen de Luján and there's a Virgen de Santo Monte and there's a Virgen de this, and there, even in Mexico, they have a Virgin of Death. Or no, I'm sorry, that's not the Virgin. That's just Santa Muerte. Like in the show Breaking Bad. Those guys were crawling on the ground to go give their offering to Santa Muerte. I don't think that was Virgin Mary, but it's kind of twistedly close. But I noticed in Argentina, where I was a missionary, every different town had a different Mary.
Extol the Lady of Nineveh, honor and praise the Lady of Erbil. None equal them among the great gods. All the goddesses cherish their name. Their two sanctuaries are unsurpassed, as are their shrines. Words shine on their lips like holy fire. Their speech will be revered forever. End quote. These goddesses were distinct personalities, each worthy of individual worship. In addition, Assyrian Ishtar was worshipped separately, and the god Ashur's consort, Mulisu, was conflated with Ishtar of Nineveh starting in the
Sounds like a
7th
boomafoo.
century. Fundamentally, Ishtar was the goddess of love and war, but this is just a broad distinction. Her identity was extremely complex depending on the motivations and situation of the scribe who extolled her. Simple categorizations will not do for such a dynamic and pervasive deity. Sometimes she was a fierce warrior goddess. Others, she was the tender mother of the king, or even the sexual partner of the king. After the fall of the Assyrian Empire, her status was greatly diminished, though small groups still revered her until some time after Alexander the Great swept across the Near East. Like most gods, she faded into obscurity as the power structures that promoted her crumbled. If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe or like the video, and keep an eye out for my upcoming video on the great conquests of Tiglath-Pileser against the Levant.
This should be a lesson for you folks. If you're considering, right now we live in the United States of America. That's where I'm at. You're probably listening to me in different parts of the world. I'm sorry. But let's say wherever we are in our each individual countries, we have histories and we have religions. Christians, I'm sure, in the United States of America might practice a little bit different in each different sect of Christianity and all of the Protestant religions. Even the Catholics have different ways that they practice depending on different areas and under which virgin. All throughout Latin America is different. But like he was just saying, how depending on where you lived in the region, when the gods would disappear when the government changed. That should let you know something. The gods that we worship will change once the government changes. And that's scary. I just had an epiphany because that's what they say about the New World Order, that we will have a whole new living religion with one God and everybody's going to be forced to worship the one religion with the one God. And they call that a living religion. I don't even know what that means. But like I said, the gods will change once the government fell. But you know what? That was before the internet. I wonder, now that we have the internet, just like if you're listening to me from a country in Asia or in Southeast Asia or anywhere, did your interpretation of what we're looking at change from what I may be thinking as someone who grew up in Texas in the United States? But like when we say in the past, when the governments fell, the gods disappeared. I think the way the internet, when the people say things go viral, you're going to have people basically staying the same or reaching a more unanimous, ubiquitous opinion of what the gods are. And I think it's going to stick around for a longer time. I want to go back to the beginning of this video. It's a short video. We missed the first half, but it's only 3 minutes long, 4 minutes long. Hold on.
Ishtar is likely the most famous goddess of ancient Mesopotamia, known to us through the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hymns of Innana, and countless other mentions in the ancient records. But who was she?
Do you know Gilgamesh is Noah? Basically, it's again, just like the goddess, the prophet changed names depending on which government and which region of the world was giving the story. Even Noah, and Gilgamesh was the one who went through a flood. Just like Moses. Do you know Akhenaten, the pharaoh with the long face, the one that they said Barack Obama looked like? It was on the cover of Time magazine. You remember that one? Who knows who Akhenaten is? That was Moses. And if you knew the story, I'll show you a picture. Wait, let's finish what we're looking at, and then I'm going to go do that.
And why does she matter? The really short answer is that she was the goddess of love and war, and one of the most widely revered individuals in the ancient world. But there is a little more nuance to the story. In the 4th millennium BC, the people of Uruk became the first known to worship a goddess named Innana. She is represented on this famous vase through these 2 reed bundles behind the priestess. and is likely represented by this sculpted head known as the Lady of Warka. However, her influence would extend far beyond Uruk, as temples were dedicated to her at Kish, Lagash, Nippur, Zabalam, and Ur. Around the turn of the 24th century, Sargon of Akkad conquered most of Mesopotamia, founding the Akkadian Empire, and with it, Ishtar emerged as a critical deity in the region. Ishtar was Akkadian, and Innana was Sumerian, but through the strong cultural contact of this period, they would become one, Innana being her Sumerian name, and Ishtar her Akkadian one. Following the collapse of Sargon's empire, Innana would retain importance in the ideology of the resurgent state of Ur. Particularly interesting is her role in the sacred marriage with the king, which has been a matter of controversy for some time now. Over the next 1,000 years, she retained a position of great import to people from Babylon to Syria. She is even seen through the name Astarte in the Lavant. Though we have a tendency to think of Ishtar as one goddess, she became many things to many people, and quite
Okay, so right there are the main three. Okay, so let's say in southern, down to Ur, southern and Samaria, she was Inanna. That was the first one in Ur, that ruined temple that he showed. That's the first account of the goddess, and that her name was Innana. Then if you go way up north through that valley on that top of that map where he showed you, that's where she became Easter. I'm going to start saying Easter. Then if you went over west towards where Israel is today, Palestine, Canaan, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, that's when she became Easter. And that's the most recent version. Okay? So what do you think? What do you think about that? If you're Christian, leave a comment. If you're here in the chat, leave a chat. But really quick, since we're talking about prophets who changed their names, and did you know, how many of you know that the story of Moses is the same as Akhenaten? Let's see. Da-da-da. Come on. Akhenaten, this guy. Okay. How many of you have seen this Egyptian pharaoh known as Akhenaten? He looks kind of like a hybrid alien, doesn't he? I think he had an elongated skull. Did you ever wonder why when those pharaohs wore those long hats that hid the back of their heads, that they were hiding the shape of their heads? I think so. I think that's how it started. And do you know, if you hear about Upper Egypt, that's south. It's the opposite of what you would think intuitively. When you hear about Lower Egypt, that's north, because it's lower in elevation, closer to the sea level of the Mediterranean. That was Lower Egypt. In the north, they had a different hat than they did in Upper Egypt, which was south, closer to, what country am I thinking of? Ethiopia. But this guy here, Akhenaten, let me blow your mind here for a second. This ancient prophet of Amarna was named Akhenaten, but his name was also Tutmosis IV. King Tut. It's not the same as King Tut, but the name Tutmosis was a two-part name. It had Tut, and the other part of their name is Moses. Do you know where this guy was found? He was in the house of Pharaoh in Egypt, found by the daughter of Pharaoh on the river in a basket, brought into the house of Pharaoh, felt like an outsider because, of course, he looked different and had a different shaped head and was kind of an introverted type. But he took the slaves out of Cairo, went across the Nile River, out into the desert to a city which you can go to today, which is called Amarna. And there he built the first monotheistic city. He taught his people to worship one God, which is monotheism. He got rid of the pantheon of the multiple gods that the Egyptians worshipped, and he had his people worship one God. So he was the initiator of monotheism in Egypt. But how much of that story sounded just like Moses of the Bible? Well, about 90% of it, right? The only thing is, in the Bible, it says that they crossed the, was it the Red Sea, or the chariots got stuck, and they crossed, and then the soldiers, the pagan soldiers, the Romans, they got swallowed up by the sea, and Moses performed his miracle, and then they went out and they wandered in the desert for 40 years and got lost. But when you look on a map, that's like saying that I got lost between here in New Orleans, for 40 years going around in a circle. It's not that far. And where is Mount Sinai? When in the Bible story, they talk about leaving Cairo, going out into the desert, and then Moses went up on a high mount. I wonder how many, maybe it's not a mountain, maybe a mount when you're in the desert could just be some structure that's up to maybe 1,000 feet, 800 feet tall. But that story is so similar to Moses. I'm convinced that the story in the Bible of the Hebrews is also the story of this figure, Akhenaten, because, like I said, he was found in a basket on the river by the daughter of the Pharaoh, brought into the house of the Pharaoh. He was raised up, and then he left. He took the slaves out of Egypt. At that time, what was Egypt? Really, Cairo. Crossed the Nile River, went up north on the west side of the banks, and actually it's south. If you're looking on a north-south map, he went across and down south to Amarna. And that's where you see the city of Amarna today. I wish I could have gone there. I haven't ever gone. I've been to Egypt. I've been to Alexandria. I've been to Cairo. I built some commercial hatcheries out there with an incubator company I worked for. And I sold vaccines for chickens. At one time, we had human vaccines and chicken vaccines. I sold Merrick. If you've ever heard Alex Jones with his theories about Merrick and Merrick vaccine, he's completely wrong, because I'm a Merrick vaccine expert, and he's out of his mind. But how many of you knew that? Did you know that Akhenaten was Moses? And his name, his official name is Tutmosis IV. So Moses is in his name. Just like King Tut was also a Tutmosis. And I think this guy was the father of King Tut. Do you know that? This was the father of King Tut. So even the guy that we know, he was found, they think he died when he was only, 18? When he became Pharaoh, and he was a young guy, and somebody murdered him. His head was crushed. I've actually been to the King Tut exhibit in the Museum of Antiquities in Cairo. And when I was there, the entire King Tut exhibit was on display. And I went, this close nose to nose with that gold face of King Tut, the cover of his head and his sarcophagus. And you find out that the beard what is it when it's gosh, now I forgot. When the beard down here is straight, it represents them alive. But if it's curled up, it represents them when they're dead. It's one or the other, I can't remember. And this is the head of a snake. But you know what I also learned? How many Mormons are in here watching? I'm going to show you something that will blow your mind. I'm sorry, spoiler alert, your religion here, but I'm an ex-Mormon, mainly because of this was one of them. Let's see. Facsimile 2. Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, facsimile 2. Where's number 1? I guess I wanted number 1. Never mind. Anyway, that one that we just looked at, this was found. Joseph Smith, the prophet, was given this in Ohio. He was a man who was selling, a carpetbagger who was selling mummies. At that time, antiquities were brought over from Egypt and they were sold in the United States in around in the 1840s. And this is what's called a head plate. When the mummy is laid down inside of its coffin, which is called a sarcophagus, this stone is put underneath their head, and it's got these depictions and the different stories of, this is Osiris, and here are the 4 Canubic characters. Who is that? Horeb, is one of them. Horus. You have the falcon, the bear, the monkey, and what's the other animal? There's 4 animals. But then I saw in the Mormon church, this is from the book of Abraham, and the Mormon church, allegedly, Joseph Smith got this scroll with these facsimiles, what they call them, these drawings. And Joseph Smith went to translate it because somebody said, go to see this Mormon guy in Ohio. They were in Ohio at that time, and he'll translate them for you. And he came up with this story that it was about. I'm going to show you this one. This is the silly part that blew my mind and made me leave the church. Okay. Before you read lower, I'm going to show you something. And we're on a tangent, but it's fun time in the show now. If you're here and you just popped in, this is part of Ask Me Anything. So nobody's asking me. I'm just going on tangents and I'm having fun. But this right here, I'll tell you what it is first. This is called a permit to breathe in the afterlife. And this is when someone who had a lot of money was... they were going to die, they purchased, I guess before they died, mummification. So this guy is the mortician who's doing the mummification. The actual papyrus that this was found on had a tear from here to here. And Joseph Smith sketched in the hands in the air in the night, but ignore that. Picture the hands at rest on the chest. Okay, and here, this is Horus. Horus takes you into the afterlife when you die. And then these 4 jars, or these 4 animals I talked about, it's the jackal, the falcon, the monkey, and the orangutan. What was the other animal? But they're called the canopic jars. And here's where they put your heart, lungs, liver, and spleen. And when you go to be judged, Mott, for example, who became Lady Justice with the scales, she'll measure your heart against a feather, and your heart has to be lighter than the feather or you don't get to go into paradise. This table is a lion. Okay, the paws, the haunches are lower in the back because it's a bleeding table. When they bleed the cadavers, the blood runs down and goes down these little channels in these legs. I've seen these in the room where they're at in the museum, and the blood pools at the bottom there. And this is called a bleeding table for mummification. But they were depicted as lions with a lion head. So this is the mortician doing the mummification. This is Horus. This is the bleeding table. These are the 4 canopic jars that go under the table with your heart, lungs, liver, and spleen. And then here in the bottom of this document, you see a crocodile. See that? This was considered what we would call today letterhead. And this was the permit to breathe in the afterlife. So if you wanted to make sure you got into heaven or paradise, you had to have this permit so that you give it to Horus so that he could take you where you needed to go. And so this is on the logo that was on all the letterhead in Egypt at the time was this crocodile in the foundation, and it represents the strength of Egypt. Okay. I learned all of this by studying, reading books, and going through the Antiquities Museum in Cairo. Now, when Joseph Smith received this depiction and the prior one I showed you, he interpreted this, but nobody at that time in the 1840s, they didn't know, or 1830s, I think it was around 1836 or so, they didn't know anything about Egypt, but Joseph pretended to be this prophet translator, and he had those stones that he could translate with. You want to hear what he said? Now watch. 1 is the angel of the Lord, figure 1, okay? Horus is the angel of the Lord. 2 is Abraham fastened upon an altar. I thought it was Isaac. 3 is the idolatrous priests of Elkanah attempting to offer up Abraham as a sacrifice. So this is an evil priest offering up Abraham as a sacrifice. Here's the angel of the Lord. Wasn't it Abraham that almost sacrificed his son Isaac? And the angel told him to stop in the Bible. Basically, he's saying that's what this is. Then he says, number 4, where's 4? Down here is at the table. The altar for sacrifice by the idolatrous priests. I was Mormon and I'm cracking up. Standing before the gods of Elkanah, Libnah, Mahakara, Korash, and Pharaoh. I guess those sounded like cool names, so he picked them out. And 5 is the idolatrous. These must be the jars where your heart, liver, and spleen go in with the animals, the falcon, the jackal, the monkey, and I think orangutan. So 5, falcon was the god of Elkanah. The jackal was Libnah, which would actually be Horus. The idolatrous god of whatever. And then 8, so these were the jars. And 9 was the idolatrous god of Pharaoh, which is the crocodile. The crocodile in the letterhead for the Egyptians was a symbol of strength of their nation. And so that's why it was on all their letterhead. So this was like a legal document. If you had a legal document that was on special paper with the ribbon around it, like your car title, it would have a crocodile. Abraham in Egypt, number 10. Where's number 10? That's 12. 12 is an empty space over here. What is 12? Reka yin yang, signifying expanse or the firmament over our heads, but in this case, in relation to this subject, the Egyptians meant it to signify Shalmau, to be high, or the heavens, answering to the Hebrew word Shalmaim. Wow, what a stretch. 11. It looks like a bunch of apartments and buildings in a city. Number 11. Designed to represent the pillars of heaven as understood by the Egyptians. I mean, can you see how this was just total BS? I grew up reading the book of Abraham and never understood it. The book of Abraham also includes in it the gospel of eternal marriage, where you go into a temple and you go through basically like a Masonic initiation, and you have to learn all of the tokens, grasps, symbols, and signs, and you have to go through the veil, and you have to Basically, it's a secret society initiation. But then you have to go through that, and then you're told all about how you can only get into heaven if you have the Melchizedek priesthood. You know, the priests in Egypt of the brother of Akhenaten or Moses were called Melchizedek. That's actually true from Egypt. That's where that came from. But it's in the book of Abraham. But the whole story and everything it's just not true. I've researched enough to know that I will actually not step on the church property if I can't help it. I even had a nephew's friend get baptized the other day, back in, when was it, in January? And I was asked, are you going to go to the baptism? And I said, sorry. And my nephew understood. And I told him, I said, I will not feel comfortable being there because I don't believe in resurrection. And baptism is a symbol. If you want to go to Romans chapter 6, let's put that on here. Romans 6. It's in the first 12 verses of Romans chapter 6. I want to read the King James version of it. Okay, if you read in chapter 6, it talks about death and resurrection. For we are buried with him by baptism into death. It's verse 4 of chapter 6 in Romans, okay? It's in the New Testament. That like as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in the newness of life. So when you're baptized, let me change my mind. So when you're baptized, you go down into the water and you completely submerge, and then that's death, and then you come up, and that's rising up. That's you're born, you're resurrected. So because today we're told from what the Bible that was made in the year 324 by Constantine, with the presbyters that all met, including the Bishop of Alexandria who took it over, and there was a bloodbath. There were some people murdered, and they had 2,200 scrolls, and they went all the way down to the last 66 books, and they tacked it on to the Hebrew Bible and said, here's your New Testament. It's like when Obama came out and said, here's your new health plan, here's Obamacare. And I think that the New Testament is about as sacred as Obamacare. It's got so many holes in it. And the gospel, if you take out sacrifice, which is Babylonian, if you take out drinking blood, eating flesh, bathing in blood, paying for sins, worshiping on Sunday, I mean, go down the list. It's paganism, folks, and it's whitewashed. And because it's Jesus and you've been brought up in it, and it's Christianity and you're told it's not pagan, you just go, oh, okay. But I think today, in today's world, if you've got the internet and you do some research, you're going to figure out it's basically just the same story. With the names have been changed and the colors have been changed. And actually what happened, I'll say it, the high priest of the area, let's say, that what we were talking about earlier, the ones who were worshiping Tammuz and weeping at the wall and offering grains and cakes to Astarte and Ashtoreth and Anata. There was another one. There's some other names. These Hebrews and ancient, I don't know whether to call them which one, whether it was Judeans or Hebrews or Jews. It wasn't really Jews until 1700, so it had to have been Judeans or whoever was there. They had been slaves, and these principles of the Babylonian sun worship that we have were prevalent in the day. So Jesus' story was hijacked. So whoever the real man was, whether his name was Isa or Emmanuel, his story got hijacked. I think he actually escaped Israel and he took off. It says in the Quran, in the chapter of women, that Mary, I found this all by myself because I happen to have a copy of the Quran. I didn't even know it, in these Harvard Classics books that were numbered like encyclopedias. It's all the great works written in the world. Starts with Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, and the Quran was in there. I'm like, oh, I've got the Quran. Let's see. I'm going to say chapter of women because Muhammad mentioned it. Blessed be his name. Chapter of women. I think it's Anisa. Then Mary. No. Isa, they called him. Isa, son of Mary. They said that let's say Judeans faked the death of Jesus and that he didn't actually die in Israel. Here it is. It says, and I was reading this all by myself. I didn't look it up. I was just browsing through there, and I found this page and started reading it. And I didn't think the verses were numbered in the Quran. Where is Jesus? Son of Mary. Isa. They called him Isa. But it says in this chapter, if I can find it. Okay, we buy the messenger. Will admit him, whoever disobeys again, the messenger. Let's see, I'm almost there. If any of you lacks being a free woman, they commit things before you. I think it was pretty far back into the chapter. It wasn't at the front. Starts to talk about, we're almost getting there. What's this? Oh, who believe, do not approach the prayer while you are drunk so that you know what you say, nor after sexual orgasm, unless you're traveling. So don't pray after you just had sex. You ever consider the shrine by the Jews or somewhere where the context? I'm trying to find the part where he says, and I'm thinking, I knew that, but wow, I didn't know Muhammad knew that. Blessed be his name. Does God forgive? Let's see. You're not controlled by the book. The book, God is grace. So are among them. Talk specifically about Isa, son of Mary. Let me go where you can actually see this while I'm looking. Sorry, I didn't know you couldn't see my screen. I believe they arbitrate. We agreed to kill yourselves. Leave your homes. It should say here. But anyway, it says Isa, son of Mary, did not die in Israel, but the Jews pretended to kill him. And I've believed that for quite some time because you see history and events of Jesus all over the world after his crucifixion. There's so many accounts of him all over the place. And once you figure out in the gospel that baptism is not something that the Lord would like, it was just kind of a remnant of when the Canaanites were in Babylon. That's why John the Baptist had it. You know, before Jesus, John the Baptist was out there baptizing people. Not just for Jesus, but he was baptizing people before Jesus came. So where did he get baptism? He was doing it to satisfy their gods. And it's because it's been ancient Babylonian practice to bathe in water or blood. Oh, why can't I find it? It's a long chapter. Complete the prayer, enemy, scripture. I want to give you the verse. Can you believe it? I found it just all by myself on accident. Right now I can't find it. But it is a long chapter. It's like 4, 5, or 6, I think longer than that, pages. Or did I find it in another chapter? I'll go back and look it up again. It might have been in a different chapter than I thought it was. Because again, like this one, I went back to look it up and I couldn't find it. I had to go back and see where I found it. But, oh, here it is. It is. Okay. Let's see what it says about Jesus here. O people of the scripture, do not exaggerate in your religion. Do not say about God except the truth. The Messiah Jesus, the son of Mary, is the messenger. This sounds like a modernized Quran because they called him Isa. The son of Mary is the messenger of God and his word that he conveyed to Mary and a spirit from him. So believe in God and his messengers and do not say three. Is that the Trinity? Refrain, it is better for you. God is the only one God. Glory be on him that he should have a son. Yeah, that's right. So don't talk about a Trinity. There's just God. There is God, a Lord, and then there's your spirit. I think the Holy Ghost is actually you. Once you connect your spirit and you're in line with your physical body, with your, what the some people might call your chakra energies, and you start to feel the spirit settle on you, that's you're connecting to God. Whoever distinguishes worship for those of the other works of faith. Proof has come to you, Lord went down. Those who believe in God so fast. Where is it? I'll have to come back in a different video, but it said clearly that they actually did not kill him, but pretended to create the religion, which is Christianity. And now you can see how actually Christianity was set up to be for the Goyim, for the people who are not of this descendancy of the son of Shem, which is the son of Noah. If you're not from that bloodline, and the grandson, which was Ashkenazi, if you're not from that bloodline, Ashkenaz was his name actually, then you're a Goy. We are. I am. All of us that aren't. If you're not, some people are adopted, by bloodline. Can you say you're Jewish? And even if Jewish is a new word, let's say in the last 300 years, are you Judean? There's actually a story. Look up Bulan, Bulan, and his empire. Basically, the Russian ex-Soviet Union all became Jewish all at one time, but they were actually a Judean form. They took on the tenets of Judaism, but they actually did not practice it. They were still practicing like the Khazarians. They were the Khazarians that practiced Baal worship, and they sacrificed their children and to Molech and Baal and things like you heard about today with the Epstein files. So we're having a deep runaround of tangents, but I love it. I wish I saw more participants in here. I guess I'm climbing up through the algorithm slowly, if I am even climbing. But it's interesting to talk about history and gospels and religions, but that's mainly why I'm not Mormon anymore, was because the Lord actually told me in an answer to a prayer, very special experience, that let me know that he was not interested in baptism. Why? He asked me. And then did not give me an answer after that, but set me on a path of searching my entire life to find out, what is baptism? Why do we do it? Why is it so important? And why do all the Christians have to do it? Christians don't ever ask that. They just go, oh, we have to, what do we have to do? Oh, go dunk in water. Okay, let's go do it. And it's a great experience, but where's it from? What does it mean? But I just showed you Romans chapter 6. It actually means we're buried with him in baptism into death. And like he was raised up from the dead in the glory of the Father, even so, we should walk in the newness of life. So we have a new life after we're baptized, but it's actually death and resurrection. And when did that happen? On winter solstice. And who was that? Well, it depends on your culture and your religion. It could have been Tammuz. It could have been Horus. It could have been, was it Nabu? Several others. I think there's about 18 different Messiah figures and Tammuz type figures. There's Mithras, Krishna. Have you ever seen a video about how they list all of the different Messiah figures that died and resurrected, and they all had 12 followers, and they performed miracles, and they were the son of a very important woman who was usually either a virgin or the opposite. You know, the Innana was known as the whore of Babylon. So, and they share all of those traits, and it seems they call it the never-ending story, or the story that, what do they say? There's nothing new under the sun. So there will always be that sun-worshiping religion for Baal, and all of these names change in the nations. And if you go through history, and I've just shown you a little bit of it, it's very confusing. But I really, even though I left Mormonism, because of like the facsimile I just showed you of the improper interpretation of that bleeding table of that man getting mummified for his permit to breathe in the afterlife. Even beyond that, resurrection I don't believe in. I don't think our bodies need to be, why would the Lord tell me we don't, why would he not like baptism or not be spurring me on to go baptize, and let me know that basically he was apathetic to it because it's Babylonian. It's winter solstice. It's about how certain figures became Baal or the sun god or became Ra or Osiris. And it's astrotheology. And that's why when you see the Vatican in the square, which is actually a circle, like I showed you, it marks all of the solstices, and you've got all the saints around you've got figures and idols and astronomy and theology. That's why it's called astrotheology. And Jesus performed 2 miracles. Well, he performed the miracle of the 2 fish, and his sign that you see, sometimes you see it on bumper stickers, is, well, it's the fish or the 2 fish or Pisces, which looks like the 2 fish going, one's black, one's white, the yin and the yang. That's because Pisces was the constellation we were looking at as the sun came up right in front of the Sphinx for 2,100 years. Do you know that it's in the zodiac if you go backwards, which is called the precession of the equinox? If you look at now, we're going into Aquarius, which is why I chose my name, Alex Aquarius. I'm dumping knowledge. Water represents knowledge, and I'm pouring out knowledge on you, trying to wake up Christians and other people. So if you look, we're in Aquarius now. 2,100 years we were in Pisces since Jesus. Then we were before that we were in Aries since Moses. And before that, we were in Taurus since, let's see, who started Taurus? There's always a biblical figure that starts each zodiac time. And before Taurus was, if you look at the zodiac wheel backwards, I think, is it Gemini? Gemini is the twins. Guess what Gemini means? Gemelos in Spanish and Latin. Moses burned the bull. Remember when he went up on the mountain, the people were worshiping the calf, and he came down and burned the gold and made monoatomic gold out of it and put it on the water and made the people drink it. I think what he did was tried to get a reading on people somehow of who didn't take when they ate the monoatomic gold. That's it just says he burned the gold and threw it upon the water, but I bet he more did something with ashes. That's ash is how you get alkaline, high pH out of liquids. I think he probably poured melted the gold, did some special process to it, used ashes, and ended up with this white powder. Passed it around, threw it on the water. But he burned they made a bull because they were in Taurus. Then he said, blow the ram's horn from now on. That's Aries, the ram. And then when Jesus was born, then we started in Pisces. And for the last 2,100 years, we've been in Pisces. And now we're in a new dispensation or time. Now we're in Aquarius. So who's going to be the leader in Aquarius? How about me? I'm the only one on the internet talking about this with the name Alex Aquarius. But that's interesting if you understand that too. There are a lot of fascinating subjects to talk about. But I think we've talked a long time. Unless there's somebody in chat that would like to talk about something, let me know. I did not receive any comments, and I don't see any participants. So I don't know what's happening with the algorithm. Maybe I need to get better thumbnails. I think it's me. I try to do this quickly, and I need to go back to, I need to make my thumbnails on my laptop. I used to make them on my cell phone, but then I would have to email them to myself. So last chance, anybody in the watching right now that would like to say something or talk about anything, name a subject or ask a question? If not, we'll have a prayer, and we'll end all of these stories with a prayer. Okay. All right. Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening that we've had to share stories about astrotheology and sun worship and the inclusion of many of these concepts into Christianity, such as Easter, fertility, and the goddesses of ancient Sumer and Persia, who were Innana and the others, eventually became Astarte, and now is Easter. There's Ishtar and Innana, and then later Astarte, and then later Isis. But as we learn that these figures have to do with the things that we practice even as Christians today, why don't we wake up and notice where the things that we're doing as practices on our holidays and calling them religious holidays are actually pagan? And no matter what mental gymnastics we do, they're pagan. And please help us to, those that are listening, those who watch this, to gain a testimony that please touch them, because they watched this video and they made it to the end with this prayer. Amen. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to sign off, and I'll be back here tomorrow. I just got a new laptop, and I'm getting this down. I'm starting this series of stories and prayer, and I hope after a few years of this, it's pretty easy for me to get on the computer and tell some stories and have a prayer. So I thought that's one thing I can do, and I can stream it because I don't cuss naturally, so I don't have to worry about that. And I just hope I don't say any sensitive canceling type words, but I don't think I will. And I'm not even advertising, so maybe I might get a sponsor someday. This is just the beginning. You're witnessing the very beginning of this. This channel of mine, Alex Aquarius, is older. I used to upload videos 7 and 8 years ago, thinking I was going to take off. But I got smashed by YouTube when the new CEO came on, when her name was the sister of the woman who ran 23andMe. Can't remember. Again, you're getting up into these people that are involved in Epstein emails. And she took over YouTube and immediately slammed all these flat earthers. And I'll tell you why. There are biblical mentions and proofs of flat earth, and there are scientific and mathematic ways that you can prove. I'm an economist. I'm a mathematician. I've studied a lot of physics, and I've taken up to 600 level math classes at Brigham Young University. So I'm not afraid of math. Somebody said the other day, like how far is the sun? And you triangulate with shadows from NOAA, from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, whatever, NOAA. And that's what Neil deGrasse Tyson said. The Earth's not flat because we actually measure the distance with shadows. Well, I did it too. It's an assumption on whether you can use the same math. If you triangulate those shadows from 3 different cities on 3 different continents at the same minute, and then you calculate with trigonometry where they meet, like stacking up TP poles, and where they cross is where the sun's at. And then you go straight down and get your base height. And you have to calculate a parsec, which is a unit of measure that's bigger than a mile. It's usually used for space. And so you end up calculating a new parsec. I did that, and then it wasn't that hard. Just trigonometry. It's not like it was calculus-based statistics. That was the nightmare in math. But what was I saying? You can prove the flat Earth, but not only that, I've seen it. I had an out-of-body experience where I actually went around some planets, and then I flew through some, and I went through the waters above and the stars and actually arrived all the way to the firmament, which I've seen drawings of. Maybe we'll talk about this tomorrow. But what was I saying? I got sidetracked. I got slammed, and I quit doing my YouTube channel because, for one, she said she was going to get rid of anyone who ever mentioned flat Earth. I've noticed a lot of people today are coming out and saying they're flat earthers, like Melanie King and others. She's got over 1 million subscribers. And she talks about flat Earth, I think, in every video. And I'm like, hey, I guess they softened up. But I made one video. You know what it was that got me? I made a video about turmeric and how, because I used to work in pharmaceuticals, and I worked in regulatory work and registering these in foreign countries all over Europe and Latin America. And I said people over the counter will take turmeric thinking that it's going to prevent them from getting a certain disease. And that's what they believe, and that's why they go to the over-counter thing, because they think that it's going to prevent them from getting it, and which is completely the right thing to say. I know I used to make labels, and that's not even off-label, but that's something. It's just a nutritional supplement, but it's actually a food that you buy in the grocery store. It doesn't have to be registered by any country. And I also said, this is what people believe, that by taking this food item and consuming it, they're going to prevent some disease. And man, I became a laughingstock. Even on YouTube, if you're a creator, they have their weekly creator powwow. There's a guy with the red hair and the beard. He made fun of me. He says, yeah, you can't say certain things like, this is going to cure blah, blah, And I went, oh my God, that was fun. And I got my videos suddenly, like right now, I'm not seeing any participants and I'm having trouble growing. At least you can find my videos now and search. It used to be, I could type a title to one of the videos I made, word for word, and scroll down to 400, 500, 600 videos, and I never found them. You could not find them. They were not even just buried. They were gone. And then all of my views, I was climbing up, and I was getting like 2,000, 2,500 views every 2 days. And then suddenly it went down to boom. I wasn't getting any more than 50 views. And it was obvious that they squashed me because my graph that was going like this suddenly flatlined at 50 and just stayed there. And so I stepped up and I tried to make better thumbnails and videos, and it didn't grow, and then I quit. But now I'm back to just stream. And we'll see if I can overcome the algorithm. And I wrote them, and I told them about what I'm doing, that I was going to come out with some new positive videos, more spiritual related, being sober, and happiness and balance related, and not so much conspiracy. And but right now, I think stories and prayers is where I'm going to start off. And it's always going to be called Stories in Prayer. My show used to be called The Plain Mundane Show. And that meant flat earth. Yeah, plain is in Plane, Plane. And mundane means worldly. So a plane is flat and mundane means worldly. So that really meant the Flat World Show. So it's the Plain Mundane Show. And if you hear it and you know, if I explain it to you, you go, oh, plain, mundane, flat world. Yeah. But because I got stomped on because of that dumb video about the food item that people were taking when they had cancer. It was just, and I wrote, I kept writing them saying, I never said that it will do this or that it's approved for that. Because I know what I'm talking about. That was my job, is to do labels and register pharmaceuticals in different countries and over-the-counter products. And I know what I can say and what I can't say very damn well. And I didn't say anything wrong. I said, people buy this food item because they believe it will do something. Because it was a magazine. It was in a magazine article in a medical journal. But sometimes YouTube, the people that run the department, it's like the fact checkers on Facebook. Sometimes they're so stupid. They do things wrong and you get screwed and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's why you might find old videos on my channel. I used to have a really bad laptop. The video's bad. The sound is bad. I didn't have a studio with headphones and an XLR mic. But I used to live right next door to NASA, and I used to run around in the rocket barn, the Saturn V rocket barn, and go over where the shuttle is on top. Independence is on top of the 747 at the Space Center, Houston. And I used to go over in front of Lockheed and talk about the open star, how it's letting the demonic spirits out. When you see the logo of Lockheed, whenever you have a pentagram and you break one side, that's where the spirits escape, through the broken pentagram. And look at the logo of Lockheed. We can talk about some fascinating stuff. I've been an awake researcher, not only since YouTube came out. I started YouTube in about late 2006. But first saw it, I think it was in 2006. Started my channel not until 2017, 16. But then growing up, I had a lot of things that happened in my life and experiences I had that kind of had me open to the world isn't what we think it is. So I'm always, and I'm the one of those people that anytime somebody says something, I just sit back and think, and I'm not a joiner. I just sit there and think, I wonder how this ties into the other thing and the other thing I know, and where does this come from? Where is it going? And is this right or not? Maybe it's wrong. I need to correct that. Can I raise my hand? I'm the one in class that would just break things down into brass tacks, as they say. And I could never just stand in line and be fed information that's not true or that I have not questioned. So I'm always going to question things. I'm always going to research. That's why I never became a Freemason. I had an opportunity. My grandfather was one, and my mother wanted to give me the book, which I believe, I never saw the book, but I think she had a copy of the Morals and Dogma of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry by Albert Pike, which is interesting. His mentor was a Jesuit missionary named Pierre Desmet, who also mentored Brigham Young. When I found that also blew my mind. And I thought, well, let me just go on Google and see if Peter Desmet and Brigham Young together on Google come up. So I typed in both of their names, and boom, I found several references. He was in winter quarters with the pioneers, and he'd already been out to Salt Lake. I think he told Brigham Young where to go to get Salt Lake and how to find Ensign Peak, when he famously sat up in the wagon and said, "This is the place that Peter told me about." He didn't say that Peter told me about, but Peter had already been there and met them in winter quarters, so they knew where they were going. So there are a lot of falsehoods in religions, especially the one I was in. And everybody I remember in high school, I told a friend that I was a Mormon. He goes, "Isn't that a cult?" I go, "No, it's a Christian religion. It's not a cult." It's really not a cult, but it's just a false religion with a false prophet. And I talked to my brother, and my sister's in that. She's not really religious at all. She just dropped out as a kid. I don't know how she tuned out, but she never liked it. But she doesn't even know the doctrine or can't even argue any specific points. I don't think anybody offended her at church or anything. She just never liked it, never wanted to go, never was interested. Me, instead, I was always whipped into shape by my mother. And I never wanted to do anything wrong where my mother would think, if I didn't go to church or I wasn't doing something or she caught me smoking or doing anything, I'd just be dead. I would think, oh, no. It wasn't until the middle of my life I figured out, I don't care what Mom thinks now. I think I would have gone out and done different things in my life. I probably would have been a rock and roll player. I started playing guitar when I was 5, and I could play Led Zeppelin and blues and all that stuff when I was 12 years old, 13. Kids used to come over my house and watch me play and go, damn, man. But my parents never bought me an electric guitar or an amplifier. They didn't want me to because my dad was teaching me classical. And I hear stories about how people got a start. And I never had professional lessons. They never took me to professional. I grew up in Cypress, Texas, which is northwest of Houston. So we were kind of out in the boot. It was a nice subdivision. There were different you've heard of the Woodlands and Champions. And we were in that area. You had Cypress, and then Cypress Creek, and then Champions, and then Klein, and Klein Forest, and then the Woodlands. And those were all the northern towns and neighborhoods, just full of subdivisions. I grew up with swim team. I was on the swim team for my subdivision. We had our own team. And I used to swim against the Woodlands. I had several ribbons and things like that. So the whole image of growing up in I think we had about 380 houses in our subdivision. And a lot of kids mostly never left, unless you got in the car and went somewhere with your mom or dad, we never left our subdivision. There was a 7-Eleven up front, and you could go down the main road to the high school. But there wasn't much around back then, and I actually got a motorcycle. I had mini bikes, and then when I was 15, I got my motorcycle license and had a Honda Express. I used to go out and see my girlfriends at night. I would leave my Honda parked in the backyard, and when the sun went down, out on my Honda Express, that's what I would have written songs about, was riding by the moonlight on my 50cc scooter to go over to the other school district far away to see another girlfriend or something. But anyway, I haven't seen anybody in participants yet. I'm wondering, I'm just going to keep doing this and see if the algorithm goes up. It's not hard for me to sit here and talk around midnight. I'm a night owl. Anytime between 11 and 2 in the morning. So, all right. Bye. See you tomorrow.